Welcome back to Gameday Tarps episode 5. This week has continued to stay busy with more and more signings around the league. We had Minnesota re-signing Gustafsson, Edmonton re-signing McLeod, Boston re-signing Swayman, Anaheim re-signing Terry, and Washington just today re-signing Tom Wilson. What are you guys' thoughts on the group we have here from the last week, and how do you think their value is for their team based on their contract status?
I like Gustafsson signing. Having Marc-Andre Fleury being the starter in Minnesota and having Philip Gustafsson just backing him up, I think that's a pretty top 5 solid goaltending tandem in the league.
Yeah, Gustafsson's 3-year term is probably just great in terms of Marc-Andre Fleury retires soon, and to see if Jesper Wallstedt can really become their number one goalie or not, and if not, then I guess you just maybe see how Gustafsson goes. So I think it's a great signing.
Yeah, and I love it under $4 million because, Fleury does have a little bit higher of a cap hit for an older goalie, so being able to keep Gustafsson at a relatively low cap hit under $4 million is pretty good for them. So I like the signing, I like the player, and I think it's going to be a good fit for them.
Out of all these contracts here, though, I think the one I hate the most is Ryan McLeod. I think the years are fine, but the money's way off. I think he needs to be paid less. He hasn't really shown any signs of a great player in my eyes. And he's a third-line player, and if I were to compare that to anyone right now, it would be Calgary when they were overpaying Monahan to be their third-line center, and he wasn't producing. So I think it's too big of a price.
Yeah, I think maybe Ken Holland is trying to, lock down one of these defenseman here, but yeah, again, I'm on the same page as you, Dakota. Having Ryan McLeod signed for 2 years, 4.2, I think that was a bit of an overprice given from Ken Holland's perspective. Maybe he definitely did overpay him.
Yeah, and I think that with McLeod's arbitration case, and it was probably going to be higher, unfortunately, for Edmonton, where with the other contracts that were being given out, McLeod was probably going to make almost 2.5. So they had to keep him above 2, I think, due to the pressure. But the fact that it is over 2 is high for a third-line center who, yeah, he's only been in the league for a year and a half, and he hasn't really been able to show that he's going to take that next step. The 2 years is great, though. Hopefully, they can get him to be worth that contract next year, and then they'll be just fine. But as of right now and as it stands, I do think that that's just a little bit too much money for a guy who's, third-line center, maybe fourth if someone else steps up and takes his spot. So that's what I think, too.
Yeah, Riley, even Ken Holland, all these Edmonton players, they'll come in and they just get big bags come payday. It's just, I don't know what the trend is there. I know it's like Toronto, you got a big market, but I just think, they really overpay their players a little bit too much, and they'll be in cap hell before you know it.
And they do need to sign Bouchard, too. I don't know how they're going to manage it. I don't know what their cap situation is like to the dollar, but I know that it's so tight that they're definitely worried about it. They might even have to move something to get him under, because you look at Bowen Byram's contract and stuff, getting $3.85 million, and you look at Evan Bouchard, who has back-to-back 40-point seasons. He's obviously going to be just slightly above that, probably around the $4 million range or more, and you just wonder how are they going to continue to fit these guys in. And I can't see Bouchard wanting to only stay at $4 million for the next couple of years, because Nurse is making 9.25, but if you look at who's arguably the more important defenseman on the team, it's Bouchard. So I think that they're just going to run into a big problem here. I think they're going to have to buy some guys out or trade some guys in the future, and we'll just have to see where that ends up for them.
Yeah, I honestly think Bouchard's the top D-man on that team. I honestly think, Darnell Nurse is definitely way overpaid, and I think, Evan Bouchard is the man on the blue line for the Edmonton Oilers. He deserves a good payday.
To follow you, Dak, with the contract that I personally don't like is Jeremy Swayman. Now, I don't mind the 1 year. I think that's just fine. But the 3.475 for a backup when Samsonov in arbitration got 3.55, that to me is just an overpay for a backup when, they had a chance to really, keep their dollars down. They could have fit some other guys under the cap. I personally think they should have traded Swayman to make it so that they had room to sign someone else instead of worrying about his contract, because you don't need a backup behind Allmark to be stellar when you have Allmark. So I don't know your guys' thoughts on it, but that's my thought on Swayman. Too high.
My thoughts are if Linus Allmark were to get hurt quarterway through the season, that's a very good backup option, having Jeremy Swayman back for that 1 year. He's going to prove himself again why they were the top tandem in the league last year. So I think it was okay. He got $3.475 million. But I mean, yeah, like I said, solid backup option just in case their star goalie Linus Ullmark gets hurt.
Now, I'll just counter that just a little bit because in the playoffs, it was reported that Allmark was injured, and they decided not to put in Swayman and trusted an injured Allmark, which ultimately probably cost them the series versus Florida. So to me, you're like, okay, you didn't show faith in this guy in the playoffs as your backup to be your starter. And now you're saying, well, if Allmark goes down, at least we have Swayman. But it's like, well, you didn't even trust him when you guys were the President's Trophy team in front of him. Now they're like half the team they were. How are you going to trust this guy to win you games with this team in front of him rather than last year's team? I think it's a weird philosophy to go for.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. I mean, Boston definitely didn't show any confidence in Jeremy Swayman in the playoffs. I really did think they should have played him against the Florida Panthers a little bit more.
I do think it is slightly overpay, but you are giving him 1 year chance to show more of what he's got. So I hope that he also kills it, as even if he has mainly a backup to Allmark. They're an exciting duo to watch, and I think to stay a top team, you're going to want that 1 and 2 goalie tandem.
Yeah, it's very rare we find these guys just that come out of nowhere and, just lighten up the league as top goalies. Like, we've had the same goalies year after year, just, being the top guys, and then they just came out of nowhere and just showed that they were the best in the league. So, I mean, it's kind of exciting, like you said, Dakota, just to have these new faces kind of in the spotlight for a change.
The next guy's contract I'm kind of 50-50 on, and that's Troy Terry, signing the 7-year, $7 million contract. I think it could be great if he keeps producing 60-plus points a year, but I think it could be terrible if all of a sudden he becomes a 40-point scorer a year. You can't be paying a guy who's scoring 40, 45 points, $7 million a year. If he's 60, 70, 80, 100 even, if him and Zegras continue to grow together, this contract is laughable in a few years. But if it doesn't get to that point, I think that it's a loss for the Ducks, that once they get good and they're actually going to be cap constrained in 3-4 years, looking like a clean contract. So that's just my thought on it. I don't know if it could be good, it could be terrible, depending on how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, Troy Terry once upon a time was a 5th-round draft pick. And, I mean, yeah, like Anaheim right now has a lot of money to throw around for these certain guys. So they definitely wanted to lock him down and see if he can keep producing within the next 7 years for his $7 million annual average. So, yeah, I'm on the fence as well, Riley. I mean, I didn't think it was horrible, but I do think that Anaheim is waiting to see if he can still be productive in the next 7 years. And just this last signing we got here, boys, holy, oh man. We got Tom Wilson at 7 years, $6.5 million average. Now, I mean, this is one that I truly do not like a lot. I mean, my thoughts on this one is just he's solely there for the next 7 years to be Ovechkin's bodyguard, just strictly help him just get to that plateau of beating Wayne Gretzky's goal record, and he's just going to be terrorizing the league, being just an absolute goon out there.
I think that him being 36 years old when this ends, I think that maybe they were, I don't even know. Usually, like we were talking about, sometimes you give up term to get a lower dollar amount. Like, if they did that, give him 7 years to drop it to 6.5, like, what did Tom Wilson want? He only played 33 games last year due to injury, so he basically missed 50. He only got 22 points in 33 games. Okay, that's fair enough. But, like, realistically, we're talking about a guy who's 29, just missed 50 games. He's a bruiser. He goes hard every game. Those guys don't last long in this league, and now you're asking him to just continue that for 7 more years and hopefully pay him $6.5 million. And I'm sure maybe it's higher now and then drops off at the end. I don't know what the breakdown is, but like still, either way, you're just paying this guy way too much money for what he provides to the team, especially if he continues to just get more and more injured as he ages.
And boys, like, who's the last enforcer you've seen go first round, top 20 in the NHL entry draft? Like, I can't even name one right now.
The closest comparable could be Ryan Leonard right now. They were comparing him to Tom Wilson, but other than that, yeah, it's been totally shied away from. Hard-nosed guys like him being taken high. They're just, yeah, we'll take him late. If he turns out good, if he doesn't, we'll just trade for a guy who's in the league when we need him. That's really the mentality around the tough guys.
Yeah, I can't really complain much. You see guys like Lucic out here making like $5 million, I think his last contract was, per year, and he was getting paid to be McDavid's bodyguard at the time. As a Flames fan, and I know most Flames fans loved watching Lucic, so I don't think they cared too much about what he was making. The term maybe hurts a bit, but yeah, I think hopefully it works out with Washington. Obviously, he'll be there longer than Ovechkin, so he'll get to see Ovechkin maybe surpass Gretzky eventually.
I have one more thought about this deal with Tom Wilson here. I mean, yeah, it's a dying breed of enforcers in the league anymore. You know, And I mean, Matt Martin, Tom Wilson, I mean, those are a few I can name off the top of my head. But just coming full circle with the whole deal. I mean, I think it's a little too much. 7 years for 6.5. I totally dislike that. I mean, Washington is 100% overpaying for Tom Wilson. But I mean, let's see if it works out in their favor.
I would have preferred, like, 3 years I wouldn't actually gawking at it because that's kind of what Ovechkin's contract has left. And then you're like, okay, he's there to protect Ovechkin. You pay him the bonus of thanks for doing this, thanks for being here. But then you go your hard rebuild and you abandon Wilson, you abandon Ovechkin when he retires, and you go into a hard rebuild. And you just restart. And then you're free. But now you've, like, locked in Wilson for when you're going to suck. And you can't trade him away to someone else who's going to need him because who's going to pay Tom Wilson at 34 years old to be on their fourth line at $6.5 million? It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever for a team to do that. It's going to be impossible to trade him. It's going to be impossible to have him be productive probably at that age. And they're going to be a terrible team. So it just makes no sense for me all the way around.
Yeah, I mean, even Tom Wilson, I mean, like, in the past, he's always been a pretty dirty player. I mean, like, you're paying this guy big bank to, like, go out there and just do cheap shots on a lot of these players. And, I mean, I know the NHLPA has had a few good talkings to with them of saying, you know what, man, like, you can't be doing this. And then guy continuously goes out and does that. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, he's averaging some good assists and goals per year. But, yeah, man, you're literally out there to, A, be a bodyguard, and B, just be a real POS to a lot of these guys out there. Just an absolute under your skin, rough and tough player.
You know what I didn't think about, actually, that's kind of funny, is maybe Washington knows this and they're like, okay, you're probably going to waste like $10 million of your salary and suspensions and stuff. We'll just pay you a little extra and then you have no worries. Just go blow that. Go kill some guys and don't worry about it. We'll just overpay you and then you can just have that go to your fund. It doesn't matter. So, I mean, maybe that's what they decided to do, but yeah, not liking this one at all.
Well, and like you were saying, Riley, with if it was like a 3-year deal, that would make sense because, yeah, your points are there. You're averaging, like maybe 50 points a season when you're playing, which is fine, but who's to say he's going to be that same 50-point player throwing the body as hard as he does in his years, like in his late 30s? So that $6 million it's gonna hurt them in the long run of that contract. In short term, it would probably be awesome for them. But yeah, just again, I don't like the term. It's gonna bite them.
I would have done no more than 4, honestly.
All right, up next, of the guys who have not been signed still, the top remaining RFAs out there, because we did the UFAs in our episode 4, we have Zegras, Bouchard, Lafreniere, Morgan Frost, Shane Pinto, Trent Frederick, and Kalen Addison. Those are the guys that are left, so I don't know what those guys will get. Zegras is going to get more than Terry. Bouchard, like we mentioned, should get north of 4. Lafreniere is a confusing situation that we have no idea where he could end up. Somewhere, I think, in the 3 to 5 range. Morgan Frost, he's more of a low-end signing. That's going to be a pretty decent deal for the Flyers. Shane Pinto kind of got hot at the beginning of the year and then really fell off, so he's probably going to end up in the 2.5, I think. Frederick, for a good grind out player on Boston, hopefully he'll probably get around 2 to 3. And Kalen Addison in Minnesota, they really don't value him, I don't think. So I don't know what he's going to get. Maybe 1, maybe 1.5. They're even looking to trade him, so I don't think he's going to get much value on the market.
Yeah, just starting off with Zegras here. I mean, NHL 23 cover athlete. As we were alluding to earlier, I mean, Troy Terry got his 7 and 7. So I mean, yeah, Trevor Zegras is going to be looking for a big payday. And again, like we said earlier, Anaheim has that money to throw around, and they are going to lock him down for a long-term big payday. And he deserves it. I mean, that guy is producing, and he is just doing so many slick skills out there that he makes it look easy, like he's playing ball hockey or something out there. Like, it's just, he's nutty. He's a nutty player with guys.
And I think Zegras will probably see somewhere around the 7 to 8 year term mark, with probably seeing around 9 to 10 mil a year.
And for those wondering why Zegras isn't signed and Troy Terry is because Troy Terry was under arbitration rights and Zegras is not. So they had a deadline with Troy Terry, and how that works is the team only gets an option of 1 or 2 years. That's all they get, and they have to pick that. And then the player gets their dollar allotted to them, and the team is stuck with whatever dollar amount that the player gets. So usually it's just a 1-year deal because the teams don't want to be overpaying for multi-years if they don't have the cap. So Troy Terry was dealt with first to make sure that his didn't go to arbitration. They got him signed for what they want, and now Zegras is definitely their main priority. And I think Jamie Drysdale is like their next priority, even though he's not up until next year. They're going to re-sign him, I think, this summer and get ahead of it so that they don't have to go through this RFA thing next year with him. But yeah, I think Zegras definitely, at lowest, he's 8.5, but I can't see him going that low. He's at least 9, but I don't see him getting more than Sebastian Aho at 9.75. So I feel like he's somewhere in the 9 to 9.5 range, in my opinion. We already discussed Bouchard at lengths there when we were talking about Edmonton, so we'll just jump to Lafreniere here. And just a super confusing situation. I mean, he's going to be pushing for more because he's past first overall pick. He has potential still to potentially become a great player, but the team obviously doesn't have the role for him to succeed. So it's going to be kind of like what's he going to get? I think $3 million to $5 million is the range. I personally think he should probably make less than that based off his actual production, but based off the pedigree of the first overall pick thing, he's going to get 3 to 5 because it is his second contract now. But I just don't think that that's good value. But yeah, he's going to be somewhere in the 3 to 5 range to me.
Yeah, probably around 2.5 to 3 something, I would assume. I think 5 is a bit of an overpay for him, unfortunately. But I do think he does have the potential to be a great top 6 player. Maybe he'll be better elsewhere. New York has so much talent on that team as is. Maybe he just needs more spotlight somewhere else, where he doesn't have all these other big name players that he's in the shadows of,
Yeah, and I mean, the New York Rangers are a big market. I mean, you definitely have a lot of spotlight in the Big Apple, but I mean, they were also coming into the 2020 entry draft, thinking they're going to get the next Sidney Crosby. I mean, they both used to play for the Rimouski Oceanic and the QMJHL. So, I mean, yeah, they kind of took a hit and a miss with him. As Riley, you were saying, like, it's just been very confusing. Like, he broke into the league and then he kind of just wasn't performing up to the hype of what they thought he'd be. So they kind of put themselves in a situation of, should we sign him short term with just the right amount of money, or can we get some assets for him? So it's hit and miss right now. But personally, I think he might get a 2 or 3 year deal, averaging $4 million. That's what I think.
And I think for him too, I don't think there's a way he takes more than a 2 or 3 year deal, because he wants to prove that he's worth 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 million like some of these guys in the league. So for him, if he's like, I'll take a 7-year deal at $4 million, all of a sudden he turns into an 80, 90 point player if they move Zibanejad or Panarin or whatever as those guys get older. It's like, oh, now he's like the most underpaid superstar in the league. So I think he only takes maybe even just a 1-year deal. Maybe he only wants 1 year because he doesn't even know, I'm sure, if he's staying on the team. So I think he wants a chance to prove it. 1-year deal, even maybe 2 years max of a bridge, and then he wants to try and cash in on that. Probably on another team, though. I can't see them keeping him, continue to be like, we trust in our young guys, and then not make it to the Stanley Cup final like they should be with how good of a team they are. So I think that he'll be moved, and I think that he'll sign a bigger contract elsewhere in a couple of years at the minimum.
And you never know, guys. I mean, every player has their ups and downs, and I mean, maybe he just doesn't have that kind of chemistry with the guys in New York. So yeah, how many times have we seen in the past where guys weren't just clicking with their team, and then they get moved by either the deadline or over the summer, and then bam, they're just having this growth spurt, if you will, with just having an offensive performance of the ages.
Morgan Frost is who we got next on the list, and I think he's just going to be at league minimum or above league minimum. He's not going to be pulling much in terms of income for at least 1 or 2 years. I don't think he signs long term either, because that's just not his best value, but I think he definitely is going to sign maybe 1.25 for 2 years or something, and just hopefully try and prove himself from there. Shane Pinto in Ottawa, much more different case, very similar to Lafreniere on the confusion side, not with the pedigree of Lafreniere, but just the fact that he started out as like the hottest goal scorer in the league for Ottawa to start the year, and then he just absolutely tanked off. Like, he had 7 goals in 7 games, I believe it was, and then he just absolutely fell off, and I think he finished with just around 20. He's an interesting case. He has the potential to be a dangerous goal scorer, but can he keep it up over a season? He's proven no. So what's that worth? Maybe he'll get 2. I think he should get around 1.5 max, personally, at least for 1 or 2 years. We'll see where that one ends up.
Yeah, I mean, he could even be the next J.G. Pajot or even Mika Zibanejad for the Ottawa Senators. So it's an interesting one to keep an eye on. I mean, he definitely could be the future of the Ottawa Senators forward group. So, yeah, one to keep an eye on, boys.
Frederick's an interesting scenario, too, because Boston's looking to fill that void for Bergeron retiring, and I don't think Boston has too much trade assets, and Frederick might be one of those guys that goes into a package for a top 6 center, I think.
Yeah, for a team like Calgary, who Boston has been noted talking to for Elias Lindholm potentially, I think that that's a good value fit to replace Bergeron. A guy like maybe Fabian Lysell, some picks going back, could be potentially what you could see in return, and I think that would be fair for both sides if you go that route.
And the last one we have on this list is Callan Addison, and I mean, he was lighting it up when his junior career for the Lethbridge Hurricanes, and Pittsburgh definitely got a top D pairing there when they decided to draft him, but then they just decided to let him go after 3 games played with the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. So, I mean, I don't know. I personally think it was a bad call trading away Callan Addison, who you didn't even let him develop much in your farm team, and you gave him away to Minnesota for Jason Zucker, who was arguably very consistently inconsistent with his time with the Penguins. I mean, now you look at him and now he's in Arizona for scrap. So, I mean, I don't know. Personally, I'm biased with it. I think it was a bad move. You definitely didn't let him develop long enough with your AHL team, and I mean, now Minnesota definitely has a solid D-man, so yeah, I don't know. I think it was a bad move way back when, but now looking at it, I do think Minnesota, if they decide to re-sign him, I mean, yeah, it's going to be a good deal for him.
Well, if you look at Pittsburgh's side of it too, they just traded for Ty Smith from New Jersey, who's essentially Callan Addison in a nutshell. Like, when you think about their playing styles, they're basically, I think that Smith is a lefty and Addison's a righty, but other than that, you're like offensive defenseman, doesn't really have much else in his game, not really, worth investing a ton of money into at this point, but it's like, really, you've invested a lot to get Zucker, and then you just basically let him walk for nothing. It's like, you could have just kept Addison in hindsight, not traded Marino for Smith, and then you might actually be better off with today's team than they are now.
And here's what didn't make sense is that, Pittsburgh is, even recently they drafted some very good defensemen. Owen Pickering, their top prospect now in their pool. I mean, way back when, a couple years back, they had another young prospect D-man coming up, John Marino, and he was lighting it up for Pittsburgh. And I mean, now they traded him away to New Jersey for Ty Smith, who they inevitably sent down to the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, and he has hardly seen any NHL ice time with the Penguins, and I think that was a really bad move, but I mean, yeah.
Another young guy they're thinking about moving is P.O. Joseph. Again, like just another young guy that they're looking to ship out.
Well, and then I've seen rumorings with, we got Pittsburgh with the Erik Karlsson trade, which is supposed to heat up this weekend, but there was another trade that, it was a mock trade, so it obviously wasn't from a good source, but I seen it was Hanifin for Owen Pickering, a couple picks, I think, from Pittsburgh, and I think Mikhail Granlund, but, that just shows that Pittsburgh hasn't really given their young top defensive prospects the playing time that they deserve or need to grow their game.
Well, even with Pittsburgh, they're notorious for giving away their first-round picks or even just trading away their top prospects. I mean, the last guy I can think of coming up recently has been Logan O'Connor. And then before that, a big notable one, Jake Gensel, coming against, the New York Rangers, his first game in the league, and he was killing it. And ever since that, his money's been paid, and he's been consistently being the Penguins' top 3 scorer behind Evgeny Malkin and Sidney Crosby. And it's just, I don't know what's going on with the Pittsburgh Penguins. They cannot keep their good prospects, and like you were saying with that mock draft, like giving away Owen Pickering, that would have been a terrible move. You have Chris Letang, who's about to be ending his career in the next couple years, and you'd want a big solid guy like Owen Pickering manning that blue line on that top pairing.
Well, that's where Hanifin would have came in, a 25 or 26-year-old defenseman who has just kind of broke out of his shell in Calgary. But, I mean, Callan Addison, who was once considered a top 4 defenseman, hasn't shown the qualities of a top 4 defenseman. Now, if they decide to resign him, maybe one or 2 years, well under $3 million, I would presume. Maybe $1 or $2 million top.
Oh, arguably, Noah Hanifin is an excellent defenseman. And like you said, he's coming out of his shell. But I don't think he's worth an Owen Pickering caliber player. I mean, I would probably say Pierre-Olivier Joseph and maybe a few picks in the future. But yeah, I would not say Owen Pickering, to be honest.
But when you look at Pittsburgh and let's say Chicago and Tampa and LA in their winning years, they all just go for it. They lose their draft picks. And you can't really say that, unfortunately, Pickering is better now than Hannafin is now. It might hurt them. Like, we all know Pittsburgh is 2-3 years away from a complete teardown restart and trying to get the next Crosby again by like 2025, 2026. So when you know that's coming and you know that the rebuild is coming, but you have these guys that you're committed to, you kind of have to just go for it in a way, right? That's what Tampa's done. That's what Colorado's doing. That's what Chicago did for years. LA did for years. And now look at, Chicago. Here they are. But lucky them, they get Bedard. So hopefully that can happen for the Penguins in a way like that. And then back to Kalen Addison to finish it off about him. I think, 1 million, 2 million, 1 or 2 years, and I think that he's going to be probably traded. I think the talk has been he's going to get moved. He's just, he's a guy like a Troy Stetcher or something that is just going to get bounced around from team to team because he's got this value of these points, but it's not like game-breaking Stanley Cup winning defenseman type talent. So he's just going to bounce around from the Arizonas and the San Jose's and stuff like that. It gets more playing time, but he definitely isn't going to be a guy who's going to really be known for helping a team get over the hump to win the cup.
Okay, but if you are Pittsburgh, they are sitting right now as the number 3 team in the NHL with the most playoff wins. Now, if they sit there and they build their prospects, they're almost forced into a rebuild if they're going to keep those guys instead of trying to keep their team good to be in that playoff picture. So you might lose your Owen Pickering or your Ty Smith or your Pierre-Olivier Joseph because they want to keep that playoff picture alive as long as they have Crosby and Malkin on that team. Now, will they be that consistent in trying to keep the playoffs going after those two go? I don't know. Maybe not with those defensemen in the playoff or in the prospect pool, I don't think. But I think Pittsburgh still wants to continue to be that good of a team. I mean, they're under Tampa and Boston as the only 2 teams ahead of them. And Tampa in the last 10 years have been a really good team and keeping their team really good.
Well, even adding to your note there, Kyle Dubas just got a promotion just yesterday with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and he has stated that they are still in win-now mode. And just very recent memory here, we had Chris Letang and both Evgeny Malkin, needing contracts. And they are definitely still in win-now mode. They want their 3-headed monster, their core 3 that have been there since 2005. So, I mean, the Pittsburgh Penguins are definitely still in win-now. But as Riley said earlier, I mean, they're going to be in a dark spot within the next couple years. So it's either you trade your prospects now to stay and win now, or you're going to, be like a Chicago Blackhawks or Detroit Red Wings and really need to start building for the future. And that could take X amount of time that some fans might think is just too much.
And unfortunately, Pittsburgh's prospects aren't really NHL ready this moment, so trade them now while they have the value unless they find a prospect within the next couple of years that can make that jump right away. Then obviously he's not going to go nowhere. But as far as prospects that need development, I think for the next at least 5 years, I don't see Pittsburgh keeping much of them if they're not NHL ready.
Well, if we go through this list here, we have 16 teams that have won the most since 08 or 09-10, and you go through, you can basically see a trend. So you see Tampa, no prospect pool, no picks, all gone. Boston, no prospect pool, really, no picks. Pittsburgh, no prospect pool, no picks. Chicago reverted the complete opposite direction, total rebuild. Capitals, you have a team that's stuck middling, about to go into a rebuild as soon as Ovechkin's gone. New York lucked into these young prospects when they were still too good of a team, and now they have a confusion like a Pittsburgh with their young guys. What do they do with them? The Lafrenières, the Kakos. San Jose, hard rebuild. Vegas, no prospects, no picks because they're going for it all. LA, stuck middling in the middle. St. Louis, again, stuck middling in the middle. They're not sure what direction they're heading. Montreal, hard rebuild. Colorado going for it. Nashville, looks like they're heading towards a rebuild here in the next couple years. They just decided to sign some guys out of confusion for staying in the middle. Dallas, they're going for it. They have no prospects and no picks. The Islanders are the worst team in the history of the NHL with where they're at. They're old as dirt, and they have no prospects, no picks, and no trade assets. And then the Flyers, who have gone the rebuild. So you see the trend of you either have no prospects, no picks, you're either stuck in the middle with what you got, or you've gone to a full rebuild in those teams that are in that 16.
Well, and out of that list, the one team that I like the most, who I think the future's brightest for is the Dallas Stars. And I mean, you can see now that they went all the way a couple years back to the Stanley Cup final and just came up too short. But like I said, I mean, you got guys like Logan Stankoven, you got Chase Wheatcroft, you have Wyatt Johnston, who showed he could stay up to the NHL level full time, and he was killing it for the Stars. And then you guys got like Christian Kyrou from the Erie Otters. Like, just the future is very bright for Dallas, and they're showing it. So I think out of those 16 teams that you named off, I think they have the brightest future by far.
Well, definitely in the next 10 years or so, all those teams, or most of those teams above Dallas, look at the age range of those players. Now you go down to Dallas, yeah, you got Suter, you got Seguin, they're old, yeah, and Ben, but like you said, their prospect pool is so deep that they're going to be an exciting team to watch in the future. So watch their numbers go up to the Tampas, the Boston, the Pittsburgh, and be that top team, as where you're probably going to see Tampa and Boston and Pittsburgh and Chicago's numbers just go down because they're going to be in that middle of the rebuild because they have no prospect, no picks, and they're going to have to build their team off free agency depth players, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, Dallas has consistently been seeing playoff times within the last decade, and I mean, yeah, they're lower on the list, but I think the next few years it'll be growing, like you said, to the top of the list because, yeah, their future's bright. I mean, Dallas has a lot of the older guys in the league, like Jamie Benn, Joe Pavelski even, Captain America there. He might be out of the league in a few years here, but it's definitely, with those older guys on the team, could really just bring that leadership veteran presence to the locker room and definitely teaching an old dog new tricks, or a new dog old tricks. So I don't know.
Now, about Dallas, think of it this way though, right? So they're all these old guys. So they have a window too. Their window is very similar to Pittsburgh's. Their guys are getting older as well. What do you do in Dallas? Like, what's better, winning the Stanley Cup or keeping these picks? Like, we love the Stankoven pick, we love the Wyatt Johnston picks, but are they worth it to have Ben retire, Seguin be older and aging out, Pavelski retire, and totally never win a cup with those guys? Was it worth it to keep those first round picks instead of trade in the years when they're good? Or should they move those picks to try and win now? Like, that's where they're stuck. It's like they didn't move every asset they could to get better. They kept it so then they have prospects, but those prospects don't necessarily fit the winning Stanley Cup window. They fit the playoff team window, but they don't fit the winning the Stanley Cup window that teams like Pittsburgh and Tampa and Chicago and LA, like, they sacrificed everything they could to build the best team year by year to get the cup multiple times within a 5-year time span. So it's something you have to consider when you're at Dallas. It's like, Wyatt Johnston, he broke in, he had a great year, but if you have a chance to get, let's say, say Barzell or something ass out of New York, right? You make the money work somehow, I don't know how, but, you aim that direction and they ask for Wyatt Johnston and Dallas says no, well, that just keeps them middling in the middle instead of trying to get the best possible team on the ice every year.
And for management in Dallas, I mean, they've made some interesting signings in the last few years, notables like Corey Perry and that, but I mean, and now the rise of the franchise player and Jason Robertson, but like the management there, I know, feels that these guys that they're getting can be the guys and win it all. But I mean, obviously it hasn't been panning out as what they thought, but I do think that if Joe Pavelski and Jamie Benn were to retire, I mean, the future definitely is bright for those shoes to be filled and potentially, have another run at the Stanley Cup like they did back in 1999.
And we have a second list here that notes like just the last 10 years. So, you can say with the motto however you like Tampa Bay started sacrificing their draft picks around 2017 when they made the trade for Ryan McDonough. They kind of kicked into gear that they were done with their prospects and going to go for the NHL ready players that were veterans and ready to go. And now you look at their statistics. So they have 34 more wins than the second place Vegas Golden Knights in the last 10 years. 34 more wins for a team that has decided that the prospects aren't it, that they're going for it with the best available talent on the board when they can get them. And to me, it just seems like it's the winning formula. That is an average of 8.6 wins in the 10-year time span. They did miss, obviously, the playoffs a couple times in there, and they got bounced by Columbus and Toronto in the first round. But that's an average of Eastern Conference final every year for 10 years. That's a crazy stat.
But it's also crazy to see that, a team that came in as an expansion team, within the last 10 years, they're already second place and behind Tampa with 54 playoff wins. To me, that's just crazy. I mean, obviously, yeah, they wanted to go that we're new to the league, but let's let's come in fighting right out of the gate. So good job there, but yeah, that's just crazy to me.
Yeah, Pittsburgh is just right behind them with 2 less at 52, and I mean, yeah, they've had some struggles in the last few years. Vegas, on the other hand, they've had a very good core. They went their first year against the Washington Capitals in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and then ever since then, they just kept building and building and building because they had that real estate to move certain guys and just keep building that dynasty team, and they just won the Cup this year. But again, with one last note on the Pittsburgh Penguins is that they've had some recent struggles against the New York Islanders in the early rounds of the playoffs, and they are trying to find their winning formula with certain guys like Jeff Carter coming over from LA, and just a lot of these moves. Jason Zucker even from Minnesota, it just wasn't working. So yeah, I can see Pittsburgh falling down that list pretty quick, and then Vegas again. They could even beat Tampa Bay for first place for most wins there.
They could for sure. And with Vegas, you got to remember that's 54 wins in 6 years, but 54 wins in 5 playoff seasons because they missed the playoffs last year. So that is just about 11 wins a year average in the playoffs, and you only need 12 to get past the Western Conference Final, 16 to win. So they're basically saying they've lost in Game 7 of the Western Conference Final every year, statistically, that they've been in the playoffs. So that's just a mind-boggling stat as well, which is awesome to see for them. All right, that's a wrap for episode 5 of Gameday Tarps podcast. As always, remember to rate and review, and thanks again for listening.